Hello, Newman University community. We are here with the Newman Bond, our official Newman University podcast, and my name is Daniel Murphy. I'm a staff member here and also an alumni of 18 MBA. And I am here with Curtis Nightingale, legendary musician. He's also an alumni of 2001. He got his undergraduate in secondary education here. Anyway, Curtis, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you.
And
thank you.
if you could just kind of tell us just a little bit about your experience here at Newman University.
Yeah, so, well, I was, at the time when I attended here, I was actually a police officer in Newton. And I was looking for kind of an unconventional process to try to get done. I was working on trying to get my teaching certification out of the way. But I had kind of a crazy schedule because I was in law enforcement and I was actually working in investigations, working in an undercover capacity. And so my hours were all over the place. I was working late nights and weekends and those kinds of things. And so I actually got into what at that time, and I don't know if they still have it, but Newton had an accelerated program. And I got into that accelerated program. If it hadn't been for that program, I don't know if I could have maybe actually completed the program at all, or if it would have just taken me forever to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
So
we do actually have a couple of accelerated programs that we're in partnership with a couple of community colleges here. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I can see how that would definitely help you out, especially a working adult in those situations, getting your education degree. So you are in a couple of bands. Go ahead and tell me about those bands.
Yeah, so I formed a band. This would have been probably 2016, 2017. The name of that band's Gods of Wrath, and it's here in Wichita. And we do basically classic metal, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Metallica, Megadeth, that kind of stuff. Pretty popular band. It's kind of a super group, if you will, of guys that play in a bunch of different bands in the area. And then I'm also in another band called Bootleg Mercy, and that band is it started off as a 90s cover band, but during the pandemic when everything shut down and nobody was playing anywhere, we sat down and started writing our own material and got in the studio and recorded, and we've actually experienced a little bit of success with that overseas in terms of album sales and streams and videos and radio interview requests. And I just did a radio interview for East London Radio on Friday. So that was kind of cool. And then I've got one next week in Ireland. So thank goodness to Zoom and all things digital that I can do that and kind of be international. Last year we were runner-up Best International Rock Band through another European radio station. So it's been kind of interesting, an interesting path.
Okay, so I know that with Bootleg Mercy, it's more kind of a 90s grunge inspired kind of a band. So why do you think that your success over in Europe has become, unexpectedly successful?
Yeah, I don't really know. I wish I could figure that out because I bottle it. But our cover stuff, when we cover, we do a lot of the Alice in Chains, Stone Temple Pilots, that type of a thing. And then the four members of the band, I'm more of an 80s rock guy, and that's, from Van Halen to Rat, that kind of stuff. And then Jeff, our bass player, is a really heavy metal guy. I mean, he likes the really heavy stuff. Rich, our vocalist, is a Pearl Jam, Dave Matthews Band kind of a guy. And then Eric, our drummer, he's also kind of more into whether he's into prog metal or maybe even just the heavier metal stuff. And so for whatever reason, that combination really puts us in, gives us a unique sound, I guess. And that's really, it's gravitated well in terms of people pulling toward us and liking what we do. And we've been kind of monitoring the streams and monitoring the songs that hit big, and we're kind of looking at that in terms of there's maybe a little bit of a formula there. We're seeing the songs that have a lot of acoustic guitar in them, for whatever reason, seem to be those are more popular. And so, so we've got to start thinking about that in terms of, we found a recipe here and we need to write more songs with acoustic guitar in them. I don't know. But
I know that some bands, they found they've gravitated towards all these heavier songs like Dusty Grant, he was kind of more an acoustic guy, and he found that all his entire band was like metal, you know, and the kind of metal guys, and then like the metal stuff that they've written has gotten them popularity. Kind of the opposite direction with you guys, you know, where you guys kind of write a couple of acoustic songs and they're just a hit, you know.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, you never know sometimes until you just kind of put that stuff out there.
Right. And I think that's been the experience. Has been, you know, we'll release, you know, we try to release a song about 30 days apart when we have material to release. And so we released a song in May called Shadow, which it's got kind of an acoustic lead on it. And then, I mean, it gets heavy, but it's fairly acoustic lead. And that song was wildly popular. We then followed that up with another more of a heavier, kind of a banger type song. And while that's doing well, nowhere near what Shadow did. And then the two previous songs we received Josie nominations for, which the Josie is basically similar to the Grammys, but the Josie is for independent artists. And we got multiple Josie nominations. Each one of the songs nominated for the Josie had acoustic guitar in them, just kind of ironically. And then we're currently nominated for two. We're currently nominated for Knife on My Back, which starts with acoustic guitar, and then we're nominated for Best Rock Band of 2023. So
that's so awesome.
Yeah, that gets that's in October at the Grand Ole Opry. I've never been there, but hey, it's kind of an iconic
Well,
venue.
that's a really cool venue.
Yeah,
and that's in Nashville.
Nashville.
Okay, yeah. So I think we should kind of talk about how we met, you know, because it's, you know, like, you know, working here at Newman, and you're a Newman alumni. So I've been getting very heavily into photography over the past year and a half, and I was doing some stuff with a band called Love Like War, and then your bass player in Bootleg Mercy, Jeff, is in Love Like War, and so his other, you know, and then so I was I was at the Hinder event at the 365 complex over in McPherson, and you guys were opening up for Hinder, and I'd never seen you guys play, and I didn't even know Jeff was in the band, you know. And I'm like, Jeff, what are you doing here? He's like, I'm about to play, you know, I'm about to go on stage. Anyway, so that's kind of how I connected with you. Did some photos and shared your photos, and we connected after that. So, and then I was at your gig doing video for you guys at the Tony's Arena event when you guys opened up for Hairball.
Right.
That was such a cool show, such a big, you know, crowd there. And I think you've opened up for Hinder once before, like after that, didn't you?
Yeah.
That was over at Hayes, maybe?
Fox,
the Fox Theater. Yeah, that's cool. Anyway, so what is it? So your current role is you're a superintendent of USD 309, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And explain a little bit about what you do as a superintendent.
So, well, I'm superintendent of schools, and so Nickerson South Hutch is my school district, USD 309. And so, you know, that's a 4A school district. We've got 2 elementaries, a middle and a high, and then we've got a virtual academy as well. That's a K-12 virtual school. And so basically my responsibility is to oversee the entire operation, and that's everything from enrollment through making sure the grass gets cut, to making sure the electric bill gets paid, to making sure we have current textbooks. It's just, you know, it's an all-encompassing position, but it's kind of that, it's a really exciting position. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of stress. It's a lot of pressure. We just did a bond initiative and just passed a bond. And that was obviously, that's just on top of everything else you've got to do. But I think the cool thing about it is when you come into it, you may have ideas, you know, just like anywhere. You working here, for example, you may think of things in terms of, you know, this would work a lot better if we did things this way. Well, if they all of a sudden thrust you into that job where you were sitting behind that desk making those final decisions, you find out pretty quickly why maybe things weren't done that way, or you start to implement those things, you can actually see whether they work. And so I think that's kind of the exciting part of my job, is that I can implement those ideas and things that I've always thought, you know, schools should really do things like this. Well, now I don't have any excuses. I'm the guy that makes that decision. So. And trying to surround yourself, I think, with qualified people that have great ideas. You don't want to put yourself in an echo chamber. You know, I think our current political system shows us the damages of that. If you surround yourself with people that are going to tell you yes, and people are going to always agree with you, you can really go down a dark path. And so getting the right people at the table, someone to be able to sit there and tell you, I don't think that's a good idea, and here's why. And so you can start to bounce those ideas and coming out of the room, while I don't have to be right and you may not be right, when we walk out of the room, we all have to be right, because we've got a whole bunch of kids that their futures are depending on us getting this right. And so it's not an ego thing at that point. It's just a matter of doing things the right way. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So being a superintendent, obviously you work with, not maybe directly, but, a lot of the, children in those USDs, may know who you are, may find it interesting that you're also a musician, playing these big venues, so, is that the case? And, what is their reaction when they find out that their superintendent, overseeing all these schools, is also in this really cool rock band or rock bands?
Yeah, I think, so much of it's generational. I think the music you and I think is cool, the kids really don't think it's all that cool. And so I think some of that's kind of a wash maybe. And it is kind of interesting, though, to be walking down a hallway in one of the buildings and hear one of my songs coming from one of the classrooms. And more often than not, it's because maybe the teacher saw I was in the building, so he pulls it up on YouTube just to see if I'll notice, kind of a thing. And so that's kind of fun. You mentioned the Hinder show at 365. When we played there were actually some of our kids in the crowd that were there with their parents that had no idea that, they didn't know who the opening bands were. They were there to see Hinder, with their parents or whatever. And then I walk on stage and they're like, wait a minute, that's, and so then afterward, we end up stuck at our table for like an hour signing autographs and taking pictures and stuff. And, those kids are standing in line with their parents and they're like, just kind of awestruck that you're Mr. Nightingale, right? And so it's just that's kind of a cool opportunity, but it does give me a chance then to kind of connect, I think, with those kids because, oftentimes those kids have a musical knowledge or a musical background or a musical anticipation in terms of what they want to do with their life. And so, when I was in school, going back to when I was in high school, ancient history, I was a 3-sport athlete, but I was also a musician. I was also in all the vocal music classes. I was also in the musicals. And so kind of helping break some of those barriers down for kids that maybe feel like they're pigeoned in where if I'm a band kid, I'm a band geek and I can't also be cool or I can't be an athlete or I can't, we kind of cross those boundaries and that's something that's kind of came, I think, over time. And maybe that's an opportunity for kids to maybe see that in a different light. That's like, wow, being a musician could be cool. Because I think it's hard for, kids when they're in school, you're playing the trumpet in band or whatever. You can't see a career in that yet. But there's an opportunity there. I started playing cornet, which is a smaller trumpet. I converted that to guitar later and, it seemed to work out okay.
Yeah, here you are, metal rock star.
Right, right.
So let's talk about some of your awards. Kind of like the whole circle of life thing where, two strangers meet because you're an alumni and I'm a staff member and, kind of happen to be interested in the same scene, which is really cool. But it all kind of circles back to 2019 during an event that you were here because you were honored at an alumni event and you have received the Beata Niedermeyer Service Award 2019. And this is a picture of you. And we had this is actually up in our office, been sitting there for 2 years, like this is the guy that I Anyway, they thought it was a cool story. Anyway, so we've written stories about you, with this award and doing other cool things with your, as an alumni and and just kind of seeing this kind of being up there and that's the guy who is, the I shot video for at the 365 complex. So anyway, what's really cool is in this, during this award banquet, I took the photos for these. Right. So I just think it's such a cool way to kind of circle back and kind of realize how small this world is and how kind of close we all are and connected.
Well, I think it was interesting. I think the first time that I met you was at that Hinder show, and we just spoke briefly, and then I remember, I think then we hired you to come up to Tony's, and I don't know, you and I were talking back, so you may not even remember this, but we were talking backstage or whatever, and we had one of those, I've seen you somewhere, man. You know, it's just like we just couldn't put it together or whatever. And then I don't remember. It was sometime later I saw you at another show, and you're like, "Hey, I figured it out. I took your picture." You know, it's like, oh yeah. So
yeah, that's crazy. Small world.
Yeah.
And so more recently, as far as awards go, in 2020, you were awarded the Principal of the Year by the USA KPA. Is that correct?
Yeah. It was during the pandemic, which kind of. Normally, I think what they do during those, and you know, they have a ceremony and they bring you up and they hand you the award or whatever kind of a thing. And so I was one of the regional finalists or whatever. And so we were on a Zoom call because we were managing the shutdown on schools and how we were managing, still trying to educate kids and finish that school year out and all of that stuff, because that was the spring of 2020, and you know, there's like another guy on the Zoom that none of us knew, our superintendent and all the administrators, and there's this other guy, and so our superintendent introduces this other guy, and the guy comes on to make this announcement that I've been awarded this or whatever. So it was kind of a, you know, it was cool. I mean, very, very neat. It was an exciting thing, but then again, it was just kind of a, stupid pandemic, you know, just another thing it took from you. And so later that fall, they actually came out to my building and physically handed me the award or whatever. But it was just kind of funny.
Yeah, strange times, times.
For sure.
Is there anything that you want to say that, you know, to potential students about like the education program here at the university? I know it's been a while since you've been here, but is there anything you can pass on to maybe somebody who's interested in an education degree?
Yeah, I would, you know, there are a couple things that I anytime I'm speaking to a group and we're talking about, you know, and again, in my line of work, getting into education, I think one of the things I always bring up is that I got great advice from my advisor when I was here. And, you know, my total goal at that point was to get my secondary degree, get my teaching license in social studies, U.S. history, and then when I retired from law enforcement, I was going to step into that role and coach football and wrestling and teach, you know, and that was kind of my whole focus, and I was really locked in on that. And one day he and I were talking, and he said, you know, you're really only one class away from getting a middle endorsement in math. You might want to really think about that, you know, because I had a couple of loose ends, you know, kind of one of those deals where I needed to take maybe an interim course or something to kind of finish out. And he's like, you can pick up one more course and you'll have another endorsement. Which in education now, in my position I'm in now, I know how important that is. At that time, not even getting into the profession yet, I really didn't understand. Big deal, right? Mm-hmm. But I went ahead and took his advice, and I enrolled in another course, and as you guys know, if you're currently taking classes at Newman, that's not a cheap decision to make. But I went ahead and stepped into it and picked up that other class and got that middle endorsement. And then fast forward a couple of years, you know, my plan had been when I retired from law enforcement, I was going to go into education. Well, the state of Kansas got themselves into a little bit of a financial pickle, if you will, back at that time, and that was around 2003, 2002. And what had happened is they passed a law that did away with something called demand transfer. I'll give a little history lesson here, being a history teacher. But what happened was in the past, so for example, Boeing, since we're in Wichita, I'll use Boeing as an example. Boeing would pay property taxes on all their equipment, like their lathing equipment, and just like you and I pay property taxes on our vehicles. And then that money cycled back and went back to the municipalities. So like the city of Wichita received parts of that money, and of course they would use that money for whatever in their budget. So in Harvey County, which is where I was from, that was happening with some of the major manufacturing in Harvey County. And so the state of Kansas had let all the cities know, hey, you're going to lose this demand transfer money. And they worked out a siphoning, so it was going to be like a 3-year phase out. But what was going to happen come 2003 was the money's gone. There's no more, right? Mm-hmm. And so in 2003, the city of Newton, where I was a police officer, lost $500,000 in budget that they had not prepared for. And so what ended up happening was they had to do some pretty major cuts. And just like a school system, and quite frankly, just like a college, when you're talking about a city municipality, a lion's share of their budget is in personnel. So they had to figure out ways to streamline their operations through personnel cuts. And so what ended up happening with the city of Newton is they ended up cutting the battalion chief's job in the fire department. So they cut 3 of their probably senior, most expensive firefighters because they'd been there longest, had the most training, et cetera. They cut the cemetery department, so they were going to expect the parks department. So the guys that lined the softball fields were now going to be responsible for digging graves. I don't think they really thought that through.
And if you drove through Newton, they have a pretty large cemetery. You know, it's usually driving. It's like cemetery to the left, cemetery to the right.
Yeah. And then the third thing they cut was the lieutenant's position from the police department. And so of all the lieutenants, there was only one that wasn't old enough to retire yet. And that was me. So everybody else took retirement, and I'm out of a job. And so I had my teaching degree. I had my, with my degree through Newman, I had my license in hand, and that all happened middle of the summer. I think June 30th was my last day of work, and if you know anything about education, we're hiring teachers in February and March. So by the time June 30th, July 1 rolls around, there are no teaching jobs out there. And so here I come looking for a social studies job, which at that time, you couldn't throw a rock and not hit 3 social studies teachers that want to coach. They're everywhere, right? I step into and there's nothing out there. And so it was a little bit of a nervous streak. In fact, I went through the entire month of July, and then finally what happened in August was there had been a building here in Wichita that hadn't hired a middle school math teacher yet. And I had a middle math endorsement. And so I got the call, and I came in and got interviewed and got offered the job on the spot. And so literally kind of full circle going back to the Newman thing is, had that advisor not pushed me in that direction to pick up that middle math endorsement, I don't know what would have happened and everything after that. I mean, all of my accolades you've already mentioned, leading to me sitting here talking to you today, probably wouldn't have happened if he hadn't given me that advice. So number one is, advice I'm giving to Newman students. Pay attention to what your advisor tells you. Listen and follow their direction, because they know what they're talking about. And you may look at it in terms of it's a cost thing, or it's a more time, or whatever that looks like. But I'm telling you, they're telling you that kind of stuff for your own good. So that certainly is the number one thing. I think number two, as I've already alluded to, is that accelerated program just really fit my life at that moment. I remember getting off work at 7 o'clock in the morning and driving to get here to class by 8, and then having those Saturday classes, which were in an accelerated format. That was just a lifesaver for me, because it would have taken me longer than, because I came in with my associate's degree, so I needed that 2 years remaining plus my what's the word I'm looking for, teacher practicum. I needed to go in and do my student teaching. Yeah. And so Newman was able to work with me and find me a placement in Newton where I was living, so that, again, getting off work at 7 o'clock in the morning, I could just drive to the school and get my day in and then go home and try to get some rest before I had to go to work that night. And so Newman was instrumental in helping me do that as well. So yeah.
By no means would it be easy, but it was convenient, because those Saturdays were available for you to go in. So
absolutely,
very awesome. Let me go ahead and close out by having you giving the opportunity to kind of tell people whatever you want to say, to the camera, whether it's promoting an upcoming show, album, or tell people where you are on social media.
Sure. So the band, the original music is Bootleg Mercy. And you can find us at bootlegmercy.com. We've got a website. We're on all the social media, so Bootleg Mercy on Facebook. We're Mercy Bootleg on Twitter. We're Bootleg Mercy Official on Instagram. All of our shows are posted there. I've been all over the place, and whether that's been in the band or just personally. Obviously, as a musician, when we go on family vacation, like we go to Austin, Texas, it's supposed to be the live music capital of the world or something, and I will tell you, we went to Austin, Texas. We actually went to all of the trendy clubs, and then I started talking to people to try to find where's the good places to go hear music. And I'm telling you, and I've been a lot of places, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a part of the scene, but I'm telling you, the Wichita music scene really has it going on. There are a lot of great bands right here in Wichita, and I've got a playlist that I have on my Spotify that's just local bands. And I forget sometimes, and I'm not listening to major hitters, because there are great bands. You mentioned one earlier, and there's a ton more in not only in Wichita, but Ether out in Dodge City is a great band, and there's just great bands all over the place.
There's Parthian in Wichita. It's
Yeah,
good
there's
stuff.
just some great talented people, and I just think people don't give them the credit they deserve. And if you make it out to a show, you'll be shocked. You see the band on stage that's as good, if not better, than a lot of stuff you may hear on Sirius or you may hear on T95 or whatever, wherever you consume music or whatever. And then you look at the crowd and there's like 10 people in there. And a lot of times those bands, they're only getting paid based on how many people walk in the door. And so it's really important that we support our scene and our people. So, yeah.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, this is the Newman Bond and Curtis Nightingale, superintendent / rock star. So thanks for tuning in. Again, my name is Daniel Murphy.